What is the most brutal killing in film, TV history? I'll never forget a scene from maybe the 90s in the UK show Spooks, where an undercover cop gets her head shoved face first into boiling oil, right in front of her undercover partner. It was so sudden and unexpected, and completely horrifying. Joe Pesci's death in Casino. First, he had to watch his brother be brutally beaten to near death with baseball bats, knowing he's next. Then he got worked over with baseball bats. And then he was buried alive next to his brother. The final scene in The Mist different than the book. So much so that even Stephen King himself was impressed. And understated as hell for such a devastating scene. Regular Murphy in RoboCop. They just kept shooting him and he took forever to die. In Pan's Labyrinth when son and father are killed after hunting for rabbits. Irreversible, the iconic fire extinguisher scene. Shit's absolutely brutal. What's the scariest non-supernatural thing that ever happened to you? 2 bison charging right toward me down a narrow wooded path in Yellowstone when I was 12. I was 14. Alone at my grandma's house around midnight. She was across the street at the bar she owned. I was playing games on her computer. About 15 feet from one of the windows facing the backyard. All of a sudden the glass from that window shatters. And I ran to one of the bedrooms. I can hear my name being called. Eventually I see my grandma's ex-boyfriend enter the living room where the computer is. He keeps saying my name. I'm scared shitless but I walk out and confront him. He says my grandma stole his ID and that's what he came for. As he's taking money from my grandma's purse. He looks fucked up on something. I would later learn he liked to smoke crack. I forget how he leaves but when he does I call the bar and people come over looking for him. They didn't find him. About a year later he did it again. And I was once again alone there. Except this time instead of breaking a window he decides to try to kick the side door in. I'm just there chilling when out of nowhere I hear the loudest bangs coming from the side of the house and I instantly knew what was happening. I immediately called the bar and they sent a bunch of people over before he could make it in. He apparently tried to jump from one of her sheds into the alley next to her house and broke his leg. He went to prison. My sister has mental health issues. We were in a foreign country, driving across mountains on a 1-lane dirt road with no guardrails. She had a complete mental breakdown and threatened many times to drive off the edge. To this day, my mom swears my sister wouldn't have done it. All I say is, you weren't in the car. You have no idea. Getting out of the hospital after detoxing. I 100% wanted it and am closing on 5 years sober. The scary part was that I had spent most of my adult life drunk so I had no idea how to be sober. I basically had to learn how to be a functioning adult at 27. Edit. Thank you for all the positive vibes folks. Getting lost on 350 acres of woods in southeast Georgia. Was found about 6 hours later. The dog found me hours before the people did. Was working as a lineman tasked to replace a 16 meters wooden power pole which requires climbing up to untie the lines from the isolators. I checked if the pole has any rot beforehand. Climbed up. Untied the lines. Climbed down. As I was packing my tools up, the pole fell from its own. What's the worst state of the United States and why? This question gets asked once a month and the champion is always Mississippi. As someone who grew up in Arkansas, I'm gonna have to go with Mississippi. At least we're not Mississippi is practically the state slogan. As a non-American, I find it interesting that everyone in the States apparently hates Mississippi. Is this going to be a hate on Mississippi thread again? I'm here for it. Edit. I know Mississippi is a problem child but it's still a state in their family. Okay? The state of denial in the Supreme Court is giving Mississippi a run for its money though. It's a common saying, thank God for Mississippi, because of how low the state ranks in many metrics. Mississippi. Highest percentage of fat people. Lowest IQs. Lowest education scores. And the lowest GDP out of every state. It's the worst by every measurable metric. Gamers of Reddit, what are some underrated games? The Urquan Masters. Jack X. Combat Racing. Everyone always talks about the trilogy. And then says not to talk about that Frontier one. But nobody says jack. Pun intended. About this gem. You know. You can buy it on the PlayStation Store for PS4 right now. It's cheap. And fun. Rhyme. A beautiful game that I won't dare spoil. But you start your adventure as a little boy on the shores of an island, chasing a red fox as you solve puzzles. The game has a hidden story that's beautifully told through visuals with no words. The ending is everything that ties the whole adventure together. I highly recommend it. It's available on PS4 and Steam. I think it might be on Xbox. But I'm not sure. Blur. I will die on this hill. Blur was the best racing game of all time. Need for Speed meets Mario Kart. It's the racing game. I'm devastated it won't ever get a remake or be replayable. Star Sector, very cheap game with very fun space combat and great visual style. Arcanum. Of Steamworks and Magic Obscura. What is a terrifying yet little known fact about computers? Your computer keyboard is probably dirtier than a toilet. A lot of people think that computers are smart. The opposite is true. Computers are very, very stupid. They can literally only do what you tell them to do. If a computer isn't doing what you want, it's because you're not telling it what to do in the correct manner. It's all just trillions of little tiny switches routing electricity to other little tiny switches. The software we use every day isn't engineered. It's all just a cobbled together Rube Goldberg mess that only barely works. Stilldrinking.org. https www.stilldrinking.org/programming-sucks. Said it best. Greater than imagine joining an engineering team. You're excited and full of ideas. Probably just out of school in a world of clean, beautiful designs. Awe-inspiring in their aesthetic unity of purpose, economy, and strength. Greater than you start by meeting Mary, project leader for a bridge in a major metropolitan area. Mary introduces you to Fred. After you get through the 15 security checks installed by Dave because Dave had his sweater stolen off his desk once and never again. Greater than Fred only works with wood. So you ask why he's involved because this bridge is supposed to allow rush hour traffic full of cars full of mortal humans to cross a 200-foot drop over rapids. Don't worry, says Mary. Fred's going to handle the walkways. What walkways? Well, Fred made a good case for walkways and they're going to add to the bridge's appeal. Greater than, of course. They'll have to be built without railings. Because there's a strict no railings rule enforced by Phil, who's not an engineer. Nobody's sure what Phil does. But it's definitely full of synergy and has to do with upper management, whom none of the engineers want to deal with, so they just let Phil do what he wants. Greater than Sarah, meanwhile, has found several hemorrhaging edge paving techniques and worked them all into the bridge design. So you'll have to build around each one as the bridge progresses. Since each one means different underlying support and safety concerns. Greater than Tom and Harry have been working together for years, but have an ongoing feud over whether to use metric or imperial measurements. And it's become a case of, whoever got to that part of the design first. This has been such a headache for the people actually screwing things together. They've given up and just forced, hammered, or welded their way through the day with whatever parts were handy. Greater than also. The bridge was designed as a suspension bridge. But nobody actually knew how to build a suspension bridge. So they got halfway through it and then just added extra support columns to keep the thing standing. But they left the suspension cables because they're still sort of holding up parts of the bridge. Nobody knows which parts. But everybody's pretty sure they're important parts. Greater than after the introductions are made. You are invited to come up with some new ideas. But you don't have any because you're a propulsion engineer and don't know anything about bridges. Greater than would you drive across this bridge? No. If it somehow got built, everybody involved would be executed. Yet some version of this dynamic wrote every single program you have ever used. Banking software, websites, and a ubiquitously used program that was supposed to protect information on the internet but didn't. That last comment refers to the famous Heartbleed bug. https://xkcd.com/1354/. That broke OpenSSL, which is what most Linux web servers use to encrypt internet traffic. A great deal of software is written by incompetent halfwits and held together with baling wire and spit. And your ability to bank and order supplies and apply for jobs and all of that depends on that software. Google Maps traffic works by GPS tracking all Android phones in real time. Subscribe, my brothers.